Hello and welcome everybody to our AI talk at ETUI. My name is Aida Ponce del Castillo and I am your host. And today I have a fantastic guest, Antonio Casilli. And with him, we're going to discuss not only his fantastic new book, but also other relevant things about digital labor and automation. Antonio is a professor of sociology at Institut Polytechnique in Paris and also a fellow at the Churchill College in Cambridge. So he recently published his latest book, Waiting for Robots, The Hired Hands of Automation, but also he also was very much involved in the production and writing of an interesting documentary that you should all watch. It's available in French, in English, and I think in Italian as well. The name in French is Les Sacrifiés de la IA. And with that, Antonio, welcome again to our AI Talks of 2025. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Aida. Thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be with you and to meet all the splendid people that are joining us today. And today I will do something which is more connected to a specific piece of literature, let's say, that I produced, that I wrote, a book that I authored, and which was published very recently in 2025, in January 2025, in the US. And the book is called, as you already reminded, Waiting for Robots. So today's presentation, which I will share in a second, has a slightly different name, a variation of on the topic, if you want. It's When Robots Don't Show Up. And this is my way of introducing how this book came about. Well, the point is that this book has been around already. This is, again, the US edition of it, but the book already existed in several translations, and it was published for the first time in 2019. Now, you might imagine that, and this is true, the book was definitely updated and changed pretty dramatically since 2019, all throughout these versions in Arabic, in Spanish, and so on and so on. And there is also a very important point that has changed since the book was first published, that a number of other books have been published, and I want to take like this second to show that this is definitely not the only book about this topic or on germane topics, the topic of the connection between labor, technologies, and inequalities and AI. A number of other colleagues have been extremely active and have published all these books that you can see here and many others that didn't fit into the page. But one thing that was particularly concerning to my publisher in the US, the publisher is the University of Chicago Press, was what if everything has changed since the first edition of the book? What if in the meantime robots have arrived and we are not waiting for robots anymore? Well, the point is that since 2019, a number of claims, wild claims and announcements have been made concerning the existence and then the actual skills and abilities of robots, smart technologies, smart devices, and AI solutions. All throughout the pandemic years, you have probably witnessed, like I did, this explosion of a number of robot waiters, or also other kinds of intelligent technologies. And of course, 2022 was the moment where LLMs became a thing, culturally speaking. They were on the cultural map. But the point is that, and this is also the point I make in the book in its 2025 edition, we are still waiting, like in the Godot in the Beckett's play, which dates back to almost 1 century ago, this kind of absurdist play where some alienated characters were waiting for a Godot that never shows up. We are still waiting for AGI or some kind of I don't know, tomorrow, technological tomorrow that never actually manifests. Because what we are served with or we are exposed to are technologies that are defective. When we have LLMs, they hallucinate. When we have robots, they malfunction. When we have other solutions, they are sometimes introduced and then they disappear pretty quickly because simply they do not entirely work. And this is the point that I make all throughout the book, that these technologies are probably not all they're cracked up to be, and more importantly, that their effect on labor has probably been a bit exaggerated, like the claims that surround our present days, let's say, being embedded in these technologies. For instance, ChatGPT has been around, yes, for 3 years, but its newest version, which is supposed to be the real AGI, real artificial general intelligence, didn't manifest. It was first announced in 2023, then put off again, and then recently, on April the 4th, Sam Altman decided to, I don't know, postpone it again, delay this much hyped GPT-5, which is the underlying model, the model underlying ChatGPT and other products. And of course, Sam Altman is just one of these tech entrepreneurs. Probably we might say that he represents one type of tech entrepreneurs, I mean, the US kind, and Elon Musk represents another kind. You know that they are arch enemies, but these traits, this feature, they share. They share this tendency to overinflate what their technologies can do. For instance, Elon Musk has been lying to his investors, to his customers for 10 years already, because he started promising this FSD, full self-driving car, unsupervised cars. He started in 2015, and then every 12 to 18 months, he would reiterate this promise, which was never met by actual reality. It was still nowadays FSD, meaning full self-driving cars do not exist. We still need people in the cars, and every time these technologies not only are not, they do not align with reality, let's say, but importantly, they also create some fatal accidents. We know that a lot of people have died while believing that cars self-drive. So, there are actual consequences. I wanted also to show you that this is not exactly, and it's not only a matter of a few tech entrepreneurs on ketamine, like in the case of Elon Musk. There are also scientists, admittedly scientists that have some clear ties with the industry, such as Geoffrey Hinton, who received a Nobel Prize in 2024, who has been, for many years working for Google. Then he decided to change his career and became some kind of prophet of the dangers of AI. And one of the dangers he's insisting upon very prominently is the dangers that AI creates for the world of labor and for workers in general. Let's hope that I have shared the sound. Otherwise, you can read the subtitles and the closed captions. Okay, so I hope that you had the sound. Otherwise, again, the closed captions were there in cases like this. And as you can see, Geoffrey Hinton insists on the fact, is pretty adamant about the fact that he believes that a lot of people will lose their jobs because of AI. And these jobs are particularly the non-elastic ones. Now, guess his job is elastic. His job is considered to be the one who will survive. But this niece of his, I don't know exactly how, family dinners go when the uncle meets the niece after what he just said. But anyways, this niece of Geoffrey Hinton will probably lose her job. And this is not only a matter of an old guy trying to, sound more interesting than he actually is. It is also a matter of a lot of existing literature that scientific literature, that goes in the direction of presenting the clear dangers, the clear risks that AI creates. Specifically, since the beginning of generative AI, there has been a lot of interest. The only and the most relevant piece of literature that was published in the journal Science, and interestingly was authored by OpenAI researchers, is this article, this study actually, called GPTs are GPT, so general purpose technologies. And this is a play on words. But anyways, the point of this article, of this study, was that 46% of the jobs in the US might see up to 50% of their tasks automated, which of course means, spells out a reduction on human workforce. Interestingly, this figure, 46% or almost that, 47%, was exactly the same one that was presented 10 years before that by a couple of other prominent researchers, Oxford researchers, in what is now known only as the Oxford study. But the actual title of this working paper and subsequently a published article was The Future of Employment, authored by an economist and a computer scientist, so Carl Benedict Frey and Michael Osborne. According to this study, automation of tasks would suppress 47% of actual jobs, formal employment in the US by 2030. And the point or the approach, the methodology that they used in this study resembles a lot the one that the OpenAI researchers employed in 2024. Basically, they take jobs and they reduce them to separate tasks and then count how many tasks can be automated. And if this automation of tasks goes over a certain threshold, they consider that the job is replaced. Now, a lot of criticism against this kind of approach, but the most important criticism comes from the facts, from the fact that we are nearly in 2030, and despite a global pandemic, a couple of major geopolitical crises, a climate crisis, we are not in that situation at all. On the contrary, over the last decade, a number of indicators and a number of studies authored by the OECD or the ILO or many others actually consistently have been showing that the risks of substitution and replacement are clearly were inflated in these studies and are now way smaller than those predictions. And especially when it comes to the recent post-pandemic years, again, for a number of reasons, we are even in a situation of a positive trend for employment. And this is just formal employment. To say, no, we are leaving aside, but it would be important to address it too. The informal employment, the quantity of people that are working but are not detectable by this kind of official statistics. And this is even more important. Basically, the point that I make in this book is that work is still there and is not going anywhere. And because it is not going anywhere, we have the responsibility, the political responsibility to address labor as something that is not disposable and that machines do not affect in the way they are presented today. They do not affect it by replacing it, but by degrading it. And this is an important point that has been made by a number of other persons, a number of other economists, for instance. I'm thinking about David Alter, he is an MIT economist who back in 2015 published this study called Why Are There Still So Many Jobs? We're basically analyzing a specific type of technology, which is basically all the self-checkout or ATM devices that are now part of our everyday life. He said, okay, these technologies were supposed to replace, I don't know, bank tellers or people selling tickets in stations and so on and so on. But what they do is they first they turn consumers into workers. So the amount of work that is necessary to actually produce a ticket, for instance, is still there. But because they make, for instance, opening and managing a bank agency so cheap, the effect has been that over the years, the number of actual banks has increased and bank services has increased. So we now have even more people employed in the banking sector because this sector has expanded. So overall, the balance between jobs that were or somehow substituted or replaced and new jobs that were created is a positive balance. And when it comes to the specific technologies that is interesting to us here today, meaning AI and especially machine learning driven AI solutions, one might say, well, this is not the same thing that David Alter was addressing. He was talking about, an ATM is just a machine according to rules, and it's a mechanical device. It doesn't contain, as of today, AI. And when it comes to AI, one might say the situation is different because these new technologies are first so efficient and then so big, even in terms of the infrastructure they require, that they are bound to replace human workers. At least this is what is somehow suggested by the existing literature. The point that I make in the book, and this is actually the point that we, meaning me and my research team called Deep Lab, have been making for a number of years already, is that we should probably have a different look at AI. We should not interpret AI only as models, only as mathematical models or foundation models. Because if we look at the models, we get only one part of the picture and probably not the most relevant one. It is relevant, of course, to the data scientists and the software engineers who design the models, and they are very proud of saying, I don't know, that GPT-4 has 1 trillion parameters, whatever the heck that means. But parameters is not all that counts in the creation of an AI solution. What is important, in our opinion, is actually the quantity and the quality of the data that is used to make these technologies possible. Of course, a lot has been said about the training data, because as you know, AI solutions are largely based on the principle of, well, machine learning. And machine learning means that somebody has to teach the machine to do what they promise to do. So like a teacher in school would show enough examples of a certain, I don't know, principle, notion, or phenomenon so that the pupils would understand. In the same way, according to this metaphor, a machine learning model learns from the data. But the question is, who produces the data? Well, there are a number of other questions, to be frank. Not only who produces the data, but how much labor goes into producing the data. And in the book, I do an extra effort to show that data are now produced in many activities and over many platforms, over many technological and economic ecosystems that make possible the existence of what we call AI. For instance, we produce data through gig work, people who deliver pizza to you, or that, I don't know, drive you around in an Uber. They produce data. For instance, they produce data for a specific type of technology, which are self-driving cars. there are also the people that produce data remotely on specialized platforms such as Amazon Mechanical Turk. They label the data and they train the data that are used in AI. And then finally, there are, well, basically you and I and whoever uses some types of technologies that go from, I don't know, Google's reCAPTCHA to ChatGPT itself, to any chatbot. Actually, we produce data while using those technologies. And for instance, whenever we use, I don't know, Claude or Gemini or ChatGPT, these chatbots, while providing us with answers to our questions, they also ask us, did you like this reply? Do you agree with this? And they ask for a thumb up, thumb down. And this is their way of extracting work from the actual users. Now, some of this work is paid for instance, clearly people who, I don't know, drive Uber cars, they are paid for, admittedly underpaid. But there are also people who are micropaid, paid very little to, I don't know, train data or moderate content. And we encounter in our empirical research a lot of people that are paid, I don't know, up to, as low as 4 cents or 1 cent per task. And of course, there is also a number of activities that are unpaid. But all these activities are relevant because they are necessary, again, to produce anything from self-driving cars to, face recognition algorithm to, of course, the chatbots that are now pervasive in our everyday life. So this is the not so secret ingredient of AI. All this labor that goes in producing data and in improving this data to make these large language models or face recognition model or computer vision models and so on exist. And all these technological solutions exist. So I told you that the question about the nature of the data is not the only one. There is also the other question of where are those data that are used to train AI? If we listen to the mainstream explanation that focuses on data centers, we can draw a map of where this data that is used, for instance, for machine learning or to train machine learning solutions is located. This data is largely located in the global north. And in a way, this kind of map tells the story, the usual story that has been told about AI, that AI was invented by white guys in places between, I don't know, Cambridge and the MIT or Dartmouth. This is not exactly the kind of empirical evidence that we have been collecting and that have been presented in this book, because basically when it comes to the people who actually produce the data that are used to train and to produce AI, according to our research, again, our research means the research that I conduct with my colleagues at the Deep Lab, which is our research program at the Institut Polytechnique de Paris. And basically, we have been exploring a few countries over the last few years, over 30 countries, and we've been conducting surveys and interviewing and administering questionnaires to thousands of people. And we have discovered that the map is, less focusing on the Northern Hemisphere, and that there's a lot of going back and forth between the North and the South. And actually, to be frank, our vision, and this is the vision that I present in the book, is also that the production of data for AI is largely a matter of the majority world. This happens in low and middle income countries in the majority of the cases. I will present some cases, but first let me introduce this part, which is the final part, by just addressing the fact that this is nothing secret. This is not some kind of weird conspiracy. This is something that has been in the press for a number of years. You don't need to look very far. You can read Time. 2 months after the launch of ChatGPT, Time magazine was very well, effective in revealing that there are hundreds, actually thousands of people in places like Kenya and then subsequently Uganda and other places that we show you in a minute, that have been training this thing. This is GPT, means general pre-trained transformers. A transformer is the type of AI, and it's pre-trained because people have been, inserting data and then improving the data. And these people, we met them. Well, not only we met them, but we helped them meet, for instance, policymakers in Brussels. Last year, a couple of times actually, we invited them to the European Parliament to discuss with policymakers. And they were coming from places like Kenya, Venezuela, Iran, Syria, again, not Silicon Valley. And this is an important point. Again, when it comes to where AI is actually produced, even if we only rely on the data that have been published by OpenAI itself, again, not a secret, not a conspiracy, they have been publishing this data. We know that we have people who have been training data in Kenya on a platform called Sama, and then also in South Africa, and then also in the UK, and then also in Turkey, and then also in the Philippines, and then also in Canada and North America. So again, this is not a secret. This is not something that is unknown in the industry. Again, the not so secret ingredient of AI. And importantly, it's not only a matter of pre-training. Over this book, Waiting for Robots, I present a number of examples that have been collected by me and my colleagues all throughout our research, our surveys over the years. For instance, in 2023, we interviewed a person in Brazil, because we did a study on Brazil, who was paid to do a quite disgusting piece of data work. She was paid to take pictures of dog excrements. Why? Because these pictures of dog excrements would be uploaded to a database that would be used to train a specific type of AI, which is actually the AI of a robot vacuum cleaner. So these vacuum cleaners, if you have one, they have to avoid all the obstacles that they might encounter in any house. And if in your house or in your apartment you have a dog and this dog is not very potty trained, well, these things can happen, and the vacuum cleaner should avoid it. And so people are paid to very little, to be frank, to do this. In other cases, it's not only a matter of pre-training, because also solutions that have been already launched on the market, so it's not pre-training, it's post-training if you want, are relying on human labor. For instance, we also interviewed people who have been checking what you say to your smart speakers or to, I don't know, any other kind of technology that includes a voice assistant. For instance, back in 2019, we interviewed somebody whose job consisted in receiving hundreds of snippets of conversation of users of a specific device. It's actually Microsoft's Cortana. And she would listen to the snippets of conversations like 5-10 seconds, and she would check if the Cortana AI assistant had transcribed correctly. So she was verifying the quality of the transcriptions, right? This creates, of course, a big problem in terms of privacy. We now have an ongoing, among the other ones, an ongoing action against Apple, because it has been revealed for a number of years already that they have been listening to people's conversation to the purpose of AI verification, like in this case. And then finally, there is also something that I address in the book, and that is, again, not a secret at all. This has been in the press, in the mainstream press. It suffices to pay attention. Is the fact that many of these technologies, even those produced by tech giants like Amazon and Google, turn out to be less automated than they claim to be. Recently, like 2 days ago, an obscure fintech called Nate became the target of the US Department of Justice, because it turns out that they were selling an AI shopping app that contained, according to the DOJ, 0% automation. But again, it is not only the case of some obscure startup, but this fraud has been the lot of companies like Amazon. Amazon just walk out, meaning they're, let's say, worker-less or cashier-less shops turned out to be controlled remotely by thousands of people in India actually performing the job of the cashier in the US, for instance, and Google too. I won't go into that. I would just focus on one example that comes from our own experience and that I talk about in the book, actually. And this example concerns a European company that sells a specific type of AI. This AI is deployed in supermarkets, and it's a smart surveillance camera that detects human behavior, especially shoplifting. And if somebody is shoplifting, sends an automated text message to the owner of the shop or to the cashier. And importantly, this is a quite complicated piece of technology. I mean, to work like this, it has not only to interpret, to recognize the human shape, but also interpret human behavior. So I will now show you the algorithm underlying this piece of technology. And the algorithm is 120 persons in Antananarivo, Madagascar. And these persons are all stuffed in one single house that has been repurposed to become a data factory. We've been spending a week with them, and we've been observing how they work. They work from, I don't know, the attic. They work from the garage. There is, again, 120 of them, day and night, only one bathroom, and no garbage disposal, just to give you an idea of the working conditions and how much are they paid. According to the owners and to some of the workers, they are paid between 90 euros per month and 110 euros per month, the equivalent in local currency. But not only it is a matter of, again, technological fraud in this case, or let's say technological shortcoming or exaggeration, because again, there is, to our knowledge, there is no algorithm. These people are actually looking at live streams coming, video live streams coming from European supermarkets, and they are sending the automated messages to the shop owners. So they are, for all intent and purposes, operating as an AI without AI. But more importantly, in many cases in Madagascar and other places, like again, Venezuela, Kenya, other places where we've been interviewing people, some people are not even paid with money. The actual, salary that these companies sometimes post is sometimes exaggerated. For instance, this is an image that I took in 2023 in Madagascar in another company, to be frank. And this company sported salaries of 120 euros per month. Again, not enough to live in a big city like Tananarivo. Even if you would believe them that this is enough, this is not enough to live and to survive in a place like this. These are very, very low wages, even for these low-income countries. But in this image, we see what was actually presented at the entrance of this company. It is some kind of meter that measures the performance of the workers, and corresponding to each level of performance, there is some specific way of payment. For instance, level 1, you're paid 1 kilogram of sugar. Level 2, 1 kilogram of red beans. 5 kilograms of sugar for level 3. Level 5 is 25 kilograms of rice. And this is one way of saying that sometimes this work is so poorly paid that it actually escapes monetary compensation, and these people are paid in kind. This is, again, an extreme case, but it's one way of saying that we are not talking about the sublime data workers that are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars per year in Silicon Valley. These are the majority of the workers in the majority world, and these people are paid extremely poorly. I will finish with 2 points. The first one is about, well, the general map of our data workflows. As of today, what we know, 2025, we know that there are countries that produce and sell AI. These are not always the countries where data work is produced. Where data work is produced, we have to look at the global south. There are a lot of data that is produced in the Philippines, Indonesia, India, so Southeast and South Asia. And this data is produced mainly for companies that are based in the UK and the US. There is an internal market to China. Chinese companies tend to keep it, tight and to basically employ people or recruit workers that are in tier 3 cities, meaning big cities, but with relatively poor when compared to, I don't know, Shenzhen or Hangzhou, and so on and so on. We have South America. South America is an important source for data work, and a lot of people work from places like Argentina, Colombia, Venezuela, and produce data for countries, for AI companies that are based in the US and also in Europe. And then, of course, there is these final triple flow that comes from Africa. African workers produce data for basically, well, any company in China, in Europe, in the US. So just to finish and to also address the final chapter of this book, of my book, Waiting for Robots. First of all, what we receive from this, what we understand from what I just presented, is that AI, at least in the general presentation of this book, is a matter of global labor arbitrage and offshoring, even more than a matter of technology. Of course, technology is involved, but this technology would not be possible if we were not in a situation where global labor arbitrage and offshoring are performed. And the point is that you know that public opinion doesn't like offshoring. So there is also the other point that I try to make in this book, that again, using the rhetoric or the facade of AI to disguise collective layoff and collective layoffs due to offshoring is also one way of avoiding the public wrath, the ire of the public opinion. And this is a point that has been made also very recently by several authors of a study published in the Journal of Consumer Research that is called Collective Layoffs and Offshoring, a Social Contract Account. And basically, these authors of this study insist on the fact that layoffs due to offshoring are perceived as an especially egregious violation of the normative expectations of the country where these layoffs take place. So when compared to automation, automation is usually preferable as an excuse or a reason to lay out people. And this is one way also of concluding with some quotable sentence, if you want to take away a message. Capital always calls itself artificially intelligent when it's about to lay off people, especially if they want to de facto offshore these people. So what do we do now? What can we do? What is to be done? This is the final chapter of the book. There are basically three main responses. Some responses are a downstream approach. They consist in establishing some forms of accountability for the platforms. This is a matter of regulation. This is a matter also of some important projects like the Fair Work project, or the Partnership of AI, which is another initiative that basically try to make the companies, the AI companies and the platforms more responsible for the working conditions of their workers. There is also an upstream approach, which consists in basically unionizing and litigation, which is, as you can imagine, an uphill battle, but a battle nonetheless that, in my opinion, is very important to fight. Then there is an outstream approach, meaning people who are trying to come up with alternatives to the present state of affairs. For instance, platform cooperativism. And this is an important phenomenon. I mean, it comes with its own baggage of controversies, but again, I just wanted to stress the fact that they are claiming, they are arguing for incorporating new ownership structures in the tech companies and in the, I don't know, platforms itself. Imagine what would happen if Uber was owned by the workers, or if X was owned by the workers. Well, probably wouldn't change a lot because it's a bunch of Nazis now. But anyway, and then of course there is also one final point that I want to mention. There are a number of new approaches and initiatives are popping up, and they tend to focus on the re-territorialization of digital labor, meaning embedding digital labor in local communities and having the local communities, bring up their own approach, their own modes of governance. And all these basically revolves around the fact that we need to to make this work visible. Invisibility is the enemy of this workforce, of the workforce that makes AI possible. And this invisibility is sometimes realized or performed via marketing language, marketing lingo. For instance, for a number of years, we have been listening to Uber describing their delivery system as contactless. It's not contactless, it's just people delivering things to you, probably not in your hand directly, but it's not contactless. In some cases, this invisibility is enforced via industrial secrets. For instance, workers having to sign NDA to not reveal what they are doing, especially when they are doing something like, again, imitating or impersonating AI. And sometimes this invisibility is just geographical distance. We do not see people in Kenya because we are not in Kenya. But if we were in Kenya, we would see that this work is not invisible if you live in places like, again, Tananarivo, Nairobi, or Kolkata in India, or Bangalore, and so on and so on. This is not a work that is invisible, and we have to break this invisibility and even this rhetoric of invisibility. So thank you very much. If you want to know more, you can scan this code and you will be redirected to not to Amazon, no, you will be redirected to the publisher, the University of Chicago Press, and you can actually look if you can have a reduction, or as I don't know, if you are, for instance, I don't know, an academic, you can have an inspection copy, or you can simply buy, or you can simply illegally download this book. You can do so many things. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Antonio, for this fantastic and profound and enthusiastic talk. Thank you for the what to do next chapter of your book that we are always looking at. Okay, we have something to do. You have some avenues to work. There are so many questions that I would like the audience to write on the chat. And while they do that, I would like to warm up the Q&A with one question related to the force, all the cases that you describe here. Something that is really shocking is that the labor that these people, workers, are doing sometimes or very often, it's very hazardous or unsafe or perhaps illegal. When workers are labeling or verifying images or content or audio, which is charged with difficult language or horrible images, who take care of these workers? What do they do actually?
Okay, so especially if we're talking about the content moderation, I imagine that this remark was about that. Well, content moderation again is one form, one type of data work and one type of digital labor. And even if they are labeled as described as content moderation, these are basically data trainers. And the data that they train and that they deal with are admittedly extremely dangerous, because in some cases you as a worker have to teach the machine what to do, and in other cases you have to teach the machine what not to do. And they are teaching the machine not to reproduce toxic language, dangerous or problematic images and pieces of content. What is done for them? Well, very little, to be frank, because over the last few years, in those countries where it has been attested their existence and where workers are unionizing, I'm thinking about Colombia, I'm thinking about Kenya, to an extent also Brazil. There have been a number of deals and partnerships between unions and some companies that have agreed to provide some forms of psychological assistance. This psychological assistance, unfortunately, is not always put in place as it is claimed to be. Workers are allowed to consult people who are not experts, not health experts. They are described as psychologists, but they do not have a degree in many cases. These are people that we have interviewed, especially in the for the documentary In the Belly of AI that you kindly mentioned at the beginning. And in other cases, they can consult these people, but in this case, they lose 1 or 2 hours per day over their work schedule. And so they are forced to do extra hours after that, which are not always paid. So they basically have to trade off between their mental health and their actual financial compensation, which is a serious problem, to be frank. And we are not in a situation where this work is taken care of and these workers are protected.
That coupled with the invisibility and the business of the promise. So, Antonio, thank you so much for this fantastic presentation. We already have some reactions congratulating you. I would like now to take some questions from our audience. Please write them down on the chat. I'll start with the first question by Jose Gallegos, who asks about this middle ground between worker ownership and the traditional corporate models. His question is there a compelling case to be made that workers should have ownership or governance rights over the data they produce?
Okay, I can think of a couple of approaches that are not entirely based on full cooperativism. Nevertheless, again, I want to stress the fact that cooperativism has long and glorious tradition. It is not only a matter of ownership, it is a matter of mutualism, it is a matter of federalism, it is a matter of actually having the works have an actual involvement in what they do and an actual governance in what they do. Now, there are other forms of governance. I'm thinking about, for instance, Isabel Ferreras and her work on the bicameral approaches to corporate organization. And basically, if we assume that, of course, on the one side, we do have capitalists who invest capital in a company or in any kind of production endeavor. But on the other side, we do have workers who invest their own labor. In this case, we can come up with some kind of bipartisan approach to this governance. And this would constitute an approach to this. There are some steps in this direction. But not that manifest basically through, for instance, the democratizing work initiative, but they do not specifically address AI so far, but things are changing.
Okay, thank you for that, Antonio. I'll now take the question by Stefano Piemontese. In your research, you have explored the connection between digital labor, AI, and migrant labor, while there is still emerging literature exploring their interaction between digital platforms and migration regimes and infrastructure. To what extent and how is migration central to data production?
To a large extent. And to be frank, this is something that I only addressed in the book, but meaning me and my colleagues, have been addressing over the years. Let me give you this example. Last year, we did a report for the European Parliament that basically showed that migrant workers in Europe performing data work, the work that is necessary to train AI, is 2 to 3 times more, 2 to 3 times bigger than migrant workers in the general population. So, you know, in the countries that we targeted, migrant citizens represent, or citizens of foreign origin, represent 8%. Workers, data workers, represent 21%. How come? And especially, where do they come from? Interestingly, people who do, I don't know, data work in French-speaking countries in Europe, they come from former French colonies. And people who do data work in Spain and Portugal come from South America. And people who do, I don't know, data work in Germany come from Turkey or Azerbaijan or other places that are clear migration sources for these target countries. So again, it is a matter of economic and political dependency that have been going on for centuries, but it is also a matter of considering these workers as some kind of remote virtual migrants. And to an extent, this is also connected to the present day situation and or crime against humanity that is performed by our governments and, for instance, the US governments when it comes to preventing migrants to live their lives in peace in the country of their choosing. What is happening with Trump's deportation is just another manifestation of what AI has been doing. Again, in this case, it's just a metaphor, but in a way, it is what AI has been doing, because AI has been allowing people who cannot travel to the US because the US is a closed country, or cannot travel to Europe because Europe is a fortress, or it has been described as such for a number of years. And they can, what can they do? Well, they can work remotely and be paid very poorly to do so. So this is one way of, again, exploiting migrant workers without even allowing them to actually reach the country of their choosing. And so a lot should be done about that, and we hope to do this in the foreseeable future.
And Antonio, I would like to connect your answer with the question of Janine Patricia Santos. One of her questions say that she was wondering if you could talk more about the unionization and worker protection of workers in the annotation sector, probably, and if there are any existing policy frameworks and even proposals to improve the working conditions for outsourced workers in the AI supply chain, or has this been largely overlooked in, for instance, in strategies for the developing the forthcoming AI factories in the European Union?
Yeah, well, okay. First of all, this question is very important because it allows us to say that, yes, of course, I mean, it is a matter of what I just described in terms of this extraction of value. It is something that concerns the majority world, but we do have data workers in Europe, in the US, in China. Again, these are internal markets, and these markets are in some cases massive, thinking about China, for instance. But it is true that if we consider these flows, these fluxes of AI data work as something that develops and deploys over supply chains, we can use existing legislation or, well, hopeful legislation intended to regulate the supply chains to actually improve the working conditions of these new workers. Let me give you an example. Last year, 2024, the European Parliament adopted the due diligence and corporate responsibility directive, which in principle and once transposed in different countries in Europe would allow European companies that are over a certain threshold in terms of their own profits and their own the number of workers that they have, to be responsible of whatever happens to their workers all throughout their supply chain. This would be a game changer. This is already a game changer, to be frank, in countries like Germany and France, who already have their own due diligence legislation. If we were only capable of leveraging these laws to have the labor rights respected, not only in the country where these companies are based, but also all throughout their subcontractors and the countries where basically their work providers are based, this would really change things, because it would basically make them responsible not only of whatever they do in terms of, I don't know, of damaging the environment, but also they would be responsible for not damaging the I don't know, the work, the market, the labor markets of the company, of the countries where they have teams of or platforms of workers that train data or label data for AI.
Let's take the question from Camilla Lohenoja from Sachs in Finland. Thank you for this eye-opening presentation. Her question is, I wonder if the data work, meaning training AI, will remain in similar level, or will it eventually decrease, since most of AI has already been trained to a sufficient level?
Alas, no, I don't think that we're going to get rid of those workers unless we change radically the approach that we use to produce these technologies. First, unfortunately, it is not true that all AIs have been, or AI solutions have been trained, because they always need retraining. Some of this retraining, as I was somehow trying to make as a point in my presentation, is about verification. You have to maintain this technology, you have to update them, you have to introduce new features. Sometimes these new features are, I don't know, teaching an LLM a new language, or updating the language it already knows because something new has happened and people have started speaking in a different way. I don't know, young people speaking with their own jargon, and you have to update your LLM. So you always constantly need to retrain those data and those models. If we just think about LLMs, to say nothing about, I don't know, self-driving cars. Again, we should put self-driving cars between brackets, quote unquote. But again, you know, I don't know, street signs change, traffic rules change, and you always need to update this thing. So the training is never over, and the training is only one little part of this endeavor in general, the endeavor of producing AI. And importantly, again, this will not change unless we abandon, for something better, hopefully, the method of producing AI solutions that is based on basically machine learning, because it's the machine learning as a part, which is only one paradigm of AI as a discipline, as a field of knowledge. And unfortunately, it's the paradigm that now receives all the funding and all the investment and all the public opinion attention. And so unless we get rid of that, we won't get rid of data and of data workers.
And maybe here also an interesting concept is human oversight. Abdullah from the KU Leuven says that the human in the loop mechanisms are encouraged when using the AI in a responsible manner. Is there risks of also offshoring or outsourcing the meaningful human oversight requirement that we now have in the EU AI Act? Yes.
Well, I'm afraid that the content moderation is the clear example of how historically, over the last decade, we have outsourced a very important part of this human oversight. This was supposed to be human oversight of, I don't know, for instance, Facebook self-filtering algorithms. First of all, it was discovered that they were not self-filtering at all. They demanded a lot of human oversight. And then it was discovered that this human oversight was better performed by people who are not paid with the salaries that they have around San Francisco. And so they started first outsourcing in Southern Europe. Again, it's interesting that it was in Barcelona and not in, I don't know, Amsterdam or Ireland, where salaries are so high or higher. And then it was outsourced in Colombia, and then it was outsourced in Kenya, and then we are in the situation we are now. So yeah, so the news are not good on that front either.
And a different type of perhaps question by Amir Peybera, also thanking for the book and the presentation. He argues that some say that AI users whose data is used to train the models are paying a kind of cost by sharing the data to support the system. So it's seen as a win-win situation. Do you agree with that?
I don't, unfortunately, because if you just look at the services, the AI solutions and platforms who are more demanding in terms of users' contribution, these are also those who insist on you paying a premium fee. If you use ChatGPT or Claude or Spotify or YouTube, you not only pay for the subscription, but then you also pay by providing your data. And then again, this idea of pieces of internet or I don't know, platforms on the internet being free is not true anymore. It's less and less true, unfortunately. If you just look at the number of services that are de facto non-free, I don't know, think about X, whatever you want to call it. So when it was Twitter, it was more or less free for everyone. Now, if it's free, it's basically unusable. You cannot use it. So de facto, you are paying with your data and with your money.
And Antonio, this has been a fantastic conversation. There are a couple of questions that I would like to take, if I may, in the last 5 minutes that we have.
Yeah, one about the self-driving cars. No.
Yes, take the one from the self-driving cars. So Warda from France, she says, self-driving cars exist in China in the form of taxis, don't they?
It's always in China, or it's always in some kind of place where we cannot go now. I mean, yes, of course we can go in China, but it's further than, I don't know, going to Spain. Let's put it like this: experimentations with self-driving car, which are at level 2 of automation. These are a number of caveats that I'm introducing, exist and have been going on. They are not going great. First of all, in order to, again, if we're talking about level 3. Self-driving car means 2 or 3, means that you need a person inside the car actually driving at the wheel, hands on the wheel. If you don't, accidents happen, and they have been happening, and they are documented. Again, these are things that by law companies have to disclose, even if some companies like Tesla decide to ignore this law and they face fines and so on and so on. They prefer to pay the fines instead of disclosing how many people have accidents while using their self-driving cars. The second thing is that to use a self-driving car, you need a specific type of roads. You need roads that are flat, that are well maintained in terms of good infrastructure, and importantly, that are straight. And this doesn't always happen. I mean, again, in some places in Belgium or France or anywhere in Europe, to say nothing about other parts of the world, let's put it like this, the fabric of a city is not predisposed for this kind of self-driving cars. So far, self-driving cars do not self-drive. If they self-drive, they have accidents and they are discontinued. So there are ways of having them give it the appearance of being self-driving. For instance, they can be remotely driven, or sometimes, and this is, again, it is documented, they disguise the drivers as chairs, meaning seats. And this, again, is something that is unfortunately very, very true and documented for a number of years.
This guiding the workers. So, but lastly, Antonio, a question about solidarity and how Rick Specht here from Unison in Wales asked, how best should we show solidarity with our exploited fellow workers who are training or moderating these AI models?
Yeah, this is a tricky question. The final question is the trickiest, to be frank, because let's put it like this. There are simple, let's say, reactions that we have as human beings. For instance, I don't know, if we know that somebody is exploited by Uber or Deliveroo, and we give them, I don't know, an extra tip or a good, I don't know, score evaluation, is this one form of solidarity? One might say yes, on a personal level, on a micro level, it is. But is it enough to break this vicious circle of exploitation? Unfortunately not, because we are doing it by using the same tools that this system of exploitation afforded us with. The same thing goes with, I don't know, refusing to use a certain technology, because we know that this technology is exploitative in nature. I am afraid that this, again, is not enough, because boycott, well, it works more or less, and it's, again, a moral stance that operates on a micro level. I am afraid that to express solidarity, we have to do something which is more on a macro level, on a larger scale, and hopefully help, for instance, the initiatives that sometimes are, well, again, difficult to be aware of. In some cases, again, if people are unionizing in India, the users of Urban Company, which is one of the biggest platforms over there, you know, this kind of workers that can sometimes perform very menial jobs and so on. They're trying to unionize. It is a matter of union labor. It is a matter of digital labor, and it is a matter of producing technologies and data that ultimately automate processes. How do we help them? Well, we help them by helping the union, or helping them entering the union, or helping them, again, if we just talk about that, or if we are aware of existing litigations or class actions against companies, we help the workers and the claimants by spreading the word, expressing solidarity. In some cases, you can also donate money to these causes, because as you can imagine, putting up a class action can be sometimes extremely expensive, and it is not something that, I don't know, 10 or 100 workers can afford in many, many cases.
Thank you once again, Antonio. We always learn a lot with you and with your empirical research. This brings us to the end of today's episode. As hard to thank you to you, Antonio, for your work and for being with us, and to the audience for being with us too and joining and asking interesting questions. We hope that you have found today's episode very interesting. It will be uploaded in our website very soon, so you can watch the replay. Thank you for tuning into our AI Talks, our ETUI. See you next time, and goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Going to cut.